Sign this today, she said, sliding a folder across my kitchen table. I'll tell you everything my husband has been hiding, including what he's been doing to you. I looked at the folder, then at her. She was completely calm. The kind of calm you only get when you've already survived the worst part. I signed it. That was 8 months ago, and I'm still not sure if what happened next saved my life or just replaced one kind of wreckage with another. Maybe both. Probably both. My name is Sawyer Holt. I'm 31 years old. I work in commercial insurance, and until about a year ago, I thought I was living a pretty decent life. Not flashy, not perfect, but decent. My wife and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. We had a 2-bedroom place in a mid-sized city that neither of us loved, but neither of us hated. We had routines, Saturday farmers markets, Tuesday night cooking, a dog we both adored but secretly argued about whose turn it was to walk. Her name was my wife, and I'm not going to say her name because, honestly, I don't want to give it any more space in my story than she already took. What I will say is that she was the smartest person I had ever been close to, and for a long time, I thought that was the thing I loved most about her. It took me way too long to realize that smart and trustworthy are not the same thing. The man she left me for was someone I'd introduced her to. He was a colleague of mine. Not a close friend, but the kind of guy you grab lunch with, the kind you invite to a birthday thing because leaving him out feels rude. His name was my colleague, and he was the kind of person who wore confidence like a jacket that fit perfectly. Successful, charming, the type that made every room feel like it was arranged for him. I never felt threatened by him because I genuinely did not see it coming. I found out the way you find out about things that have been hiding in plain sight for too long, by accident. She had left her laptop open on the dining table. She never did that. She was careful, meticulous, the kind of person who locked her phone even when she went to the bathroom. But that one Tuesday night, she left it open. And I walked past and I saw his name in a message thread, and something in my chest just stopped. I didn't read it all. I read enough. I closed the laptop. I went into the kitchen and stood there for about 4 minutes staring at the wall. Then I walked the dog. I didn't say anything for 2 weeks. I know that sounds strange, but I needed to understand what I was looking at before I blew everything up. I started paying attention differently, noticing the way she held her phone now. The late client calls. The shifts in her mood that I'd previously chalked up to work stress. Once you know what you're looking for, you can't unsee it. I confronted her on a Wednesday morning before either of us had to be anywhere. I kept it simple. I told her what I saw. She didn't deny it. She also didn't cry. She sat very still, nodded once, and said, "I was going to tell you. I just hadn't figured out the right time. There's no right time for that." She knew that. I knew that. We both just sat in it for a moment. She moved out 3 weeks later. I didn't ask her to. She just started packing a bag one afternoon, and I went and sat in the backyard with the dog and let it happen. The divorce was quiet and fast, no kids, no house to split. The dog stayed with me because she didn't fight for him and I wasn't going to bring it up. The day after the paperwork was finalized, I was sitting in my kitchen eating cereal at 10 in the morning because I had nowhere to be and no reason to pretend I was okay, and there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it, and a woman was standing on my porch, late 20s, maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back. She was wearing a gray coat that was slightly too formal for a Tuesday morning. She had a folder tucked under one arm, and she looked at me with the kind of steadiness that you only get from someone who has rehearsed this moment several times. "Are you Sawyer?" she said. "Yeah, I'm Priya," she said. "I'm his wife." She meant my colleague, the man my wife left me for. I stood there for a second. I didn't know he had a wife. I genuinely did not know. That felt important. Later, I would learn it was. "Can I come in?" she said. Not urgently, calmly, like she was asking if she could sit down at a library. I let her in because I had absolutely nothing left to lose, and also because there was something in the way she said it that made me feel like she already knew the layout of the room. She sat at my kitchen table. She didn't look around. She placed the folder down in front of her and folded her hands on top of it. "I know this is strange," she said. "I'll be quick. My husband has been running a pattern, not just with your wife, with several people. You're not the first, and if I don't do something, you won't be the last. I sat down across from her. What kind of pattern? I said. She opened the folder. The first thing she laid out was a stack of financial documents. Not my finances, other people's. Names I didn't recognize at the top of forms I did recognize. Loan applications, power of attorney documents, a business registration with 3 principals listed, one of whom was listed as a silent partner. He finds people in transition, she said. Divorce, job loss, death in the family. People who are a little disoriented, a little off balance, and he gets close to them, offers help, gets access. Access to what? I said. Accounts. Credit. Sometimes property. He builds relationships with their partners first. People like your wife, who get close enough to gather information. Then when the person is at their lowest, the extraction begins. I looked at the documents, then at her. He's been doing this for how long? That I can prove? 3 years. That I suspect? Since before I met him. I sat back. The cereal was still on the table. I pushed it aside. Why are you telling me this? I said. She looked at me for a moment before answering, like she was deciding how much truth to give all at once. Because you're next, she said. And because the only way to stop him is with someone who has standing, someone he's actively defrauded. I haven't lost anything yet, I said. You will, she said quietly. He already started. Your name is on 2 documents you've never seen. One is a secondary guarantor clause on a business loan. The other is a liability form tied to a real estate holding. The air in the room changed. How is that possible? Your wife had access to your information for 6 years, she said. Simply, without drama. Personal details, signature samples, enough. I think that was the moment I understood what kind of woman my wife actually was. Not just someone who had an affair, someone who had been useful. Priya slid the folder toward me. I need you to sign something, she said. A joint legal agreement that lets us file together. It protects both of us and gives us a combined standing to approach investigators. Without it, I'm just a wife claiming her husband did something. With it, we're 2 defrauded parties with documentation. I looked at the agreement. It wasn't a marriage license or anything dramatic like that. It was a legal document with very specific language about shared representation in a fraud case. I read it. I'm not a lawyer, but I've been reading insurance contracts for 7 years. I know what I'm looking at. It looked real. It looked precise. It looked like something a person files when they know exactly what they're doing. I signed it. Good, she said. She took her copy, left mine on the table, and stood up. I'll be in touch within the week. Don't reach out to your ex-wife. Don't transfer or move any of your accounts yet. And if he calls you, be normal. She said it like she was leaving instructions for someone who could actually execute them. I appreciated that more than I expected to. What do you get out of this? I said before she reached the door. She paused. Her back was to me. I want out clean, she said. No liability, no scandal, no one coming for me 5 years from now because I knew and said nothing. She turned around, just slightly, and I want him to understand that I was 3 steps ahead the whole time. Then she left. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. The dog came over and put his head on my knee and I just sat there. I called in sick to work. The next 6 days were the strangest of my life, and I had just been through a divorce, so that's saying something. Priya texted me on Thursday. Short, clinical messages. Things like, don't use the joint credit card you still have access to. And, I need you to pull your credit report. Screenshot everything. Don't delete anything. I did all of it. On Saturday, she sent me an address and said to meet her there at 2 in the afternoon. It was a small office suite in a nondescript building near the edge of the business district. Not a law office exactly. More like a conference room someone had rented by the month. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table with 2 laptops open and a woman I didn't know standing near the window. This is the investigator, Priya said. She's been looking at his activity for 14 months. She ran into a wall. We're the wall she ran into. The investigator was in her mid-40s, practical looking, the kind of person who does not waste time on pleasantries. She looked at me once and then at the documents I'd brought. Your name was used to guarantee a loan for a shell company registered in Delaware, she said. The company exists on paper, has no employees, and has already received 2 disbursements from a government small business fund. The fraud exposure on your identity alone is over $400,000. I didn't say anything. That's before the real estate, she added. I looked at Priya. She was watching me with that same steady expression she'd had on my porch. Not cold, exactly, but contained, like someone who had already processed every version of this conversation and was now just watching it happen in real time. How did you find me? I said. I found him first, she said. And I found your wife second. And once I understood the full structure, I realized you were the only person with a clean name and a direct connection to both of them. What does that mean? Clean name? No fraud history. No financial complications. No skeletons they could use to complicate the case. You're boring, she said. And for the first time since I'd met her, the corner of her mouth moved. That's actually extremely useful. The investigator walked us through it methodically. There were 4 other victims they'd identified. 2 had already moved or changed contact information. 1 had filed a small claim and been quietly paid off. The 4th had no idea anything had happened. My colleague and my wife, I was still struggling to think of them together, as a unit, as partners in something, had been working a specific circuit. Find the target. Build proximity. Extract quietly. Move on before anyone connected the dots. He's been doing variations of this for years, the investigator said. Always involving a partner. Always someone who is already close to the target. It makes the access look organic. I thought about that. The years of my marriage, the little pieces of access she had without me thinking twice. My social security number was on our joint tax returns. My signature was in 100 places. My habits, my schedule, my weakness for agreeing to things without reading them carefully. All of it available. I felt something I hadn't felt since the day I found out about the affair. Not sadness, not betrayal, something colder than that. The recognition that I had been a resource, cataloged and earmarked and used. What do we do? I said. We wait, Priya said. For what? For them to try to clean it up, she said. They will. They always do. Once they sense something shifting, they come back around to manage the loose ends, and that's when they make mistakes. She was right. It took 11 days. My ex-wife sent me an email. Casual, almost cheerful. Hey, I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about everything and I feel bad about how it ended. Would you want to get lunch sometime? No pressure. Just wanted to clear the air. I read it 4 times. Then I copied it and sent it to Priya and the investigator. The response came back in under an hour. Don't reply yet. We're tracking. This is the contact we expected. 2 days after that, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A man introduced himself as a financial consultant working on behalf of a company I'd allegedly contracted with. There were some bookkeeping irregularities, he said. Nothing to worry about. Just some routine clarification needed. I said I wasn't familiar with the company. He said my name was on the registration documents. I said that was interesting and that I'd have my attorney reach out. There was a pause. Then, that won't be necessary. Very routine. I said I was sure it was and hung up. I texted Priya. He called. She responded, good. Don't move anything. Don't sign anything. Don't meet anyone. And then, 3 days later, now. The investigator filed the complaint on a Wednesday morning. Combined report, 2 complainants, full documentation package. The fraud exposure, the identity misuse, the shell company disbursements, the forged signature samples. I didn't know exactly when or how they would act on it. I expected it to take weeks. The kind of slow institutional machinery that grinds along without you seeing it. It took 6 days. I was at work, eating lunch at my desk when Priya texted me a single word, done. I sat with that for a minute. Then she sent a follow-up. He was picked up this morning. 14 counts. She's been located. They're moving on her this afternoon. I put my phone down on my desk. My colleague, the one I'd had lunch with, the one I'd once spent 20 minutes helping debug a presentation for, was being arrested 14 floors above whatever story he'd been telling himself about how smart he was. My ex-wife, the woman I'd shared a bed with for 6 years, who had stood next to me at my mother's retirement party, who knew my coffee order and my worst habit and every door code I had, was being picked up somewhere while her plans dissolved. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I mostly felt tired and quiet, and like I wanted to take the dog somewhere with a lot of sky. The legal process moved faster than I expected. The documentation Priya had assembled was, according to the investigator, one of the most thorough fraud packages she'd seen in 14 years. There were time-stamped communications, financial trails, a digital record of the shell company structure that had been, apparently, not quite as untraceable as intended. My ex-wife's attorney tried to negotiate down. It didn't go well for her. When you have records of someone actively coordinating access to a person's identity in writing, over an extended period, the negotiation leverage is not in your favor. My colleague tried a different approach. He claimed he had been unaware of the full scope, that my ex-wife had acted largely independently, that he was, in effect, also a victim. The investigator told me this over the phone, with a tone that made clear she found it imaginative. Did anyone believe that? I asked. The documentation made it a very short conversation, she said. I got a call from a victim compensation coordinator at some point during all of this. She walked me through what I was owed. The exposure on my credit had been real, but had not yet been acted upon fully. Because we moved before the full extraction, the actual financial damage was limited. The fraudulent accounts would be unwound. My credit would be documented and protected. There would be a settlement from the civil side, down the road. I thanked her and hung up and sat in my car in the parking garage for a while. Priya and I had coffee once, about 3 weeks after the arrests. Her suggestion, a neutral place, a coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of us lived in. I got there first. She arrived exactly on time, ordered something simple, sat down. "How are you doing with all of it?" she said. "I keep waiting for the other shoe," I said. "Like there has to be something else." "There isn't," she said. "That's the strange part. You just have to accept that it's over." I looked at her for a moment. "How long did you know?" I said. Not accusatorially, just honestly curious. She wrapped her hands around her mug. I suspected something was wrong about a year before I figured out the full picture. I knew he was not what he said. He was probably 8 months into our marriage. Finding out the specific shape of it took time. "Did you love him?" She considered the question seriously. "I think I loved who I believed he was, which is a different thing. And once I understood the difference, it was actually easier to move." We sat with that for a while. "What happens to you now?" I said. "I go back to my life," she said. "I was a project manager before all of this. I'm still a project manager before all of this. I'm still a project manager. I have an apartment and a cat and a very long reading list, and that's fine." I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd had in months. "I have a dog," I said. "I know," she said. "You mentioned him when I first came to your door. You were standing there looking like someone had recently stolen your entire life, and you said, 'The dog stayed with me.' Like that was the part you needed me to know." I didn't remember that, but I believed her. "Was any of it real for you?" I said. "Working with me, I mean. Or was it entirely just the case?" She set down her mug. She looked at me the same way she had the first time. I asked her a question she decided to answer honestly. "You kept showing up," she said. "Every time I gave you something difficult, a document, a decision, a piece of information about what your wife actually was, you didn't fall apart. You just processed it and asked what to do next. That's not nothing. That's a very practical answer," I said. "I'm a practical person," she said. We finished our coffee. We walked out to the sidewalk. The city was doing its afternoon thing around us. Everyone moving somewhere, the low sound of traffic and wind. "What do you do now?" she said. "Not about the case. About me." "I think I just live," I said. "I think I remember how." She nodded once. She pulled her coat tighter. Then she looked at me sideways, almost smiling. "Your dog," she said. "What's his name?" "Murphy," I said. "Good name," she said. And she walked away. I stood there on the sidewalk for a moment. Then I went home, clipped Murphy's leash to his collar, and we walked until the sun was low and the air had that cold, clean smell that you only get at the end of a long day, when everything that happened is finally behind you, and everything that happened is finally behind you, and everything that hasn't happened yet is still quiet and waiting. And for the first time in a year, that didn't feel like a threat. It just felt like what comes next. I've thought a lot about the moment I signed that document at my kitchen table. Priya was sitting across from me, calm in a way that felt almost unnatural. And I was a man who had just finalized a divorce and eaten cereal alone at 10 in the morning. There was no reason to trust her. There was no obvious reason to do anything she was asking. And yet I read the document and I signed it, and I think that decision, made quietly, in a kitchen that still smelled like someone else used to live there, was the moment things actually started turning around for me. Not because of luck, not because the universe suddenly decided to be fair, but because I chose to pay attention instead of fall apart. That's the thing nobody tells you about being betrayed by someone you trusted completely. The temptation afterward is to go numb, to stop reading things carefully, stop asking questions, stop believing your own instincts, because your instincts told you everything was fine for years and they were wrong. You want to just go through the motions. Let other people make the calls. Disappear into routine until the pain gets quieter. I understand that impulse. I lived it for weeks after she left. But going numb is exactly what my wife and my colleague were counting on. They needed me passive. They needed me too disoriented to look at a document closely, too defeated to ask questions, too soft to push back when someone called with a casual story about bookkeeping irregularities. The whole system they built depended on me being a person who wouldn't notice. Priya noticed, and then she came and found me, and she gave me the choice to notice too. What I learned from all of it, not as a lesson someone handed me, but as something I earned by actually living through it, is that intelligence without honesty is just a weapon someone turns on the people around them. My wife was brilliant. My colleague was charming and strategic and 3 steps ahead in every room. And they used all of that to take from people who had done nothing except trust them. That's not strength. That's a particular kind of cowardice dressed up in competence. Priya was just as smart as either of them. Smarter maybe, in the ways that actually matter. But she used it differently. She spent 14 months building a case not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted the thing to actually stop. She wanted clean. She wanted honest. She was willing to walk up to a stranger's door and have an uncomfortable conversation, because the alternative, staying quiet, staying safe, letting it continue, was something she couldn't live with. That's the part that stayed with me most. Not the arrests, not the case closing, not even walking Murphy that evening when everything was finally behind me. It was the image of her sitting at that conference table with 2 laptops open, having done the work, having told the truth, having shown up. You don't get to control what other people do. You don't get to protect yourself from every person who decides you're useful to them. But you do get to decide, when it matters, whether you go numb or whether you pay attention. Whether you sign the document you actually read or the one someone's counting on you to skip. I signed the right one, and Murphy got a long walk. And the air was cold and clean. And that was enough.